Hi everyone, welcome again to another session of Learning Together. I am Christian and this is Assessment and Learning class. In today's session, we are going to talk about the three purposes of assessment. There are three purposes of assessment, namely assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment as learning. Assessment for learning occurs when teachers use inferences about the student's progress to inform their teaching. Assessment of learning occurs when teachers use evidence of student learning to make judgment on student achievement against goals or standards. And assessment as learning occurs when students reflect on and monitor their progress to inform their future learning goals. To further understand the three purposes of assessment, let's have it one by one. Let's start first with assessment for learning. Assessment for learning, or AFL, this is the assessment para sa pagkatuto. It is a formative type of assessment used by the teacher to inform their teaching. It may occur before and throughout the learning sequence to determine the progress and the gaps. It may occur before and throughout the learning sequence in order to determine the progress, that means learning progress, and the learning gaps. From the word format, this means that the teacher examines all the activities in class and use those evidences whether to reteach the concept or to move on to the next lesson. Examples for assessment for learning, or EFL, are SeatWorks diagnostic test before conducting the real discussion, Q&A during discussion, question and answer during discussion, and even quizzes. Ideally, assessment for learning results are recorded but not graded or not part of the grading. Basically, assessment for learning is done to improve the teaching and learning process. Now let's proceed to assessment of learning, or AUL. Assessment of learning is also known as the assessment ng natutunan or assessment ng pagkatuto. It is a summative type of assessment used by the teacher to determine what the students have learned in a unit or chapter against specified standards or goal. Assessment of learning is done at the end of every unit or chapter in order to certify the student's competence. Examples of assessment of learning are mastery test, periodical test for basic education, achievement test. For college, we have prelim, midterm, semifinal, and final. Assessment of learning are assessments for grading purposes, and these types of assessments are usually the one being reported. Now let's go to assessment as learning, or ASL. This is assessment bilang pagkatuto. This is what we call self-assessment. This is also formative in nature, wherein the students are given the opportunity to monitor and critically reflect their own learning and prepare the necessary adjustments for their learning. This is a self-directed learning as well, wherein the students use their metacognitive processes to think about their own learning, what strategies to support that particular learning, and the mechanisms that they will use to advance that learning. Examples of assessment as learning are reflective journals, reflections, insights. Assessment as learning is the highest form of assessment, and this is used for students to monitor their own learning progress. Now, to sum up the three purposes of assessment, we have assessment for learning, or AFL. This is done by the teacher formatively to improve teaching and learning process. Next is the assessment of learning, or AUL. This is also done by the teacher summatively or at the end of the unit for grading purposes. Lastly, assessment as learning, or ASL. This is done by the students to monitor their own progress. This is talking about reflection and insights. Those are the three purposes of assessment. I hope you are learning.